Okay.
Okay. Minerals can reduce the risk of getting coronavirus and may reduce the severity of the infection. Dr. Kelman and the Kelman Wellness Center can help you. Dr. Kelman also treats patients with the coronavirus infection with a treatment of high-dose oral and intravenous vitamin C, as well as with various herbs and supplements. Dr. Kelman can send a lab to your home to test for the coronavirus and antibodies. You don't have to wait online at an urgent care center with people who might be carriers of the virus. To reach Dr. Rafael Kelman for a consultation, call 833-MD-HELP-ME. That's toll-free, 833-MD-HELP-ME, and online at kelmancenter.com.
The preceding program is a paid advertisement. The opinions and views expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of AM 620 WSNR or its management. This is AM 620 WSNR, Jersey City.
Shalom Aleichem Rabbi Sai. This is Yehuda Levin, and you're tuned in to Levin at 11, heard each and every Thursday evening, Leil Shishi, from 11 p.m. to the midnight hour, which is an apt description of what we're here to accomplish. We're here to catalog not how everything is so wonderful in kumbaya and geschmack and it's gewaldig, but au contraire, there are enough people, parties, programs that are doing this. We are here to convey to you the Weltanschauung, the hashkafa, the outlook, the perspective and approach of the Gedolei Yisrael of yesteryear, particularly in the areas of morality in which we are cascading towards Gemara. Let us begin. Again, I want to say that this program should be a schus. Le'iloi, all the neshamos, hakadoshos that were lost to us, in particular in this recent ongoing pandemic, because it ain't over yet. And for refuah shalema, for the many cholim that we don't hear about that much. I don't know what's happening with Rav David Feinstein. I know, excuse me, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, they were asking us to say Tillim for Rav David ben Sima or Shima. I don't know what's happening, but L'Kayim Banu Chachmei Yisrael, not only Rav Feinstein, but all the Gedolei Yisrael that we need so desperately, especially now when there's such an ervuvia. And we'll talk about that more when we see something that we haven't seen, mamish, maybe since seldom, if ever, since Sheshes Yemei Bereshis. We haven't seen such a thing that Choshev Rabbonim from a Bezdin, a Choshev Admor, should tell us, Beresh Galei, using Torah terminology, that we have to vote for people who support legalizing loitering for the purposes of snus, who support teaching deviance in public schools and yeshiva schools. And we're told we have to vote for them, and the Rabbanim tell us that we have to do this in the name of the Torah, Baruch Hashem Yokim HaTorah Hazeh. So it's now more important than ever that we should all daven constantly on a daily basis, L'Kayim Banu Chachmei Yisrael. Chachma, authentic people who haven't been blinded by the circumstances of this last half a century. This program should be a zchus li'ili nishmas Avi Moiri Avram ben Yeshayahu Alevi Harini Kaparas Mishkava V'imi Merasi Masha Bas Yisrael Harini Kaparas Mishkava Zichronim Levracha, and all the other niftarim, and it should be a zchus for refuah shalema for all of the cholim v'ani Yehuda ben Masha B'Seicham. Let us begin with Talmud Torah Derabim. The Svarim say that Mishnah is Neshama, Oisis Neshama. So let us have in mind that these Mishnayos should be Le'ilu Nishmas, the Neshamas. This is from the second parak of Shkolim. Mitzarfim Shkolim L'Dar Koinos. You could convert Shkolim into Darkoinos, which is to take the smaller coinage and convert it to a larger units. Because it lightens the burden on the way to Yerushalayim, where they have to give the machzor shekel. just like there were receptacles for the Matzis HaShekel called shofros in the Beis HaMikdash itself, kacha yu shofros b'Medina, in the various towns and cities, provinces throughout Eretz Yisrael, there were also shofros there, where people did not have to wait until they arrived in Yerushalayim late in the game to give the Matzis HaShekel. Au contraire, they gave it, as we learned in the first Masechta, in the first Mishnah of the first Perek of Shkolim, that they started to be mashmiyan al hashkolim. Already they started to remind people from Rish Chodesh Adar. A particular city, the city folks sent their Matzis HaShkolim with a shliach, it was stolen or he lost it, in Nitrim Truma, if in the Beis HaMikdash Truma had already been withdrawn, that means they took already out expenses for the various karbonis, etc., that they use the Matzis HaShekel for, and they took it with the intention that it's going to be covered in part by what comes in. So therefore, it's considered consecrated. It already went over to Hegdish. And therefore, Nishboin like Isbarim, the Shlichim have to make an oath that they are innocent of any malfeasance or wrongdoing. They didn't steal it. They weren't posheya. They weren't negligent. Like Isbarim to the Kaboyim in the cities who were in charge of the Matzis HaShekel. The imlav, and if they're not to the gizborim, rather of the treasurers, rather of the Beis Hamikdash. If not, they swear to the city folk who sent them. Since the shliach is exempt, so now the bnei ha'ir have to replace the Matzis HaShekel that was lost because it was consecrated. Nimsa'u, if afterwards they find the Matzis HaShekel, all the Shkolim, the Ganavim realize that they had stolen mois of Hegdish, money of Hegdish, and they are alarmed, or for whatever reason they do tshuva, and they return the money. What happens? There's now replacement funds for the Matzis HaShekel. Elu ve'elu Shkolim. Both of them now become shkolim that are used for the various purposes that Matzis HaShekel, that the shkolim are used from the Beis HaMikdash. The ein oilin l'shana haba, and you can't say, okay, this will be for next year. You can't do that. It doesn't. You can't hold it over. And therefore, in other words, the hand of Hegdish is on top, and that's the way it is. It was destined that the people should have to give twice the Matzis HaShekel. I want to just say a very brief Divar Torah on the concept. We notice that the word that is used for the receptacles of the Matzis HaShekel is a strange word. The word is shofros. Shofros is the same word that we use with relation to the instrument that we blow on Rosh Hashanah, shofros. So, what is the connection? We might suggest a spiritual analogy, a spiritual algebraic equation. Elul is to Tishrei, as Adar is to Nisan. Just like Elul is a preparation for Tishrei, and therefore the Pirkei, the Rebbe Yalosa tells us that from the time of the Dar HaMidbar, they would blow from the time that Moshe went up to receive the Luchei Shniyos every day to remind the people not to sin and do it and to have a redux of the Chet HaEgel. They would blow the shofar from Elul. So therefore, we continue that ancient custom, that primordial custom, until today, and we blow the shofar, the whole Elul. preparatory to Rosh Hashanah, where we have the biblical imperative to blow the shofar. Similarly, the Machzis HaShekel accomplishes something similar to shofar in a spiritual sense, and therefore preparatory to the Rosh Hashanah of Nisan and the Chodesh Elochem and all the new things that come, the Chodesh Aviv and the Zman of Cheirus, etc. So preparatory to that, we donate the shkolim starting from Rosh Chodesh Adar, which is the equivalent of Rosh Chodesh Elul. And to drive that point home, the terminology that's used by the Mishnah is that we deposit the shkolim in shofars, because on a spiritual level, I'm suggesting that Machzis HaShekel, that shofar and Machzis HaShekel accomplish similar things. I would like to augment, I'd like to buttress, I'd like to support this contention, this possibility with the following. In certain Machzorim, the older Machzorim, there is a Zohar that is printed in the older Machzorim that people would recite before Tekiyah Shofar. And they would state, it states in the text of that Zohar, that there was a very primordial, ancient, far-off spiritual world, very lofty level, and that world was called Shofar. And when we blow the Shofar in Rosh Hashanah, we access that primordial world, which is a pre-sin stage, etc. It brings us back to Koydem Achet. I don't know if the Zohar spells that last point out explicitly, but I think that's the connotation, that in part it takes us to Hashivenu, Chadish Yameinu Kikedem, like before Koydem Achet. Shofar. Similarly, I believe that there is a Zohar that says that there is an ancient world called Shkolim, a shekel, rather. And when we give the Machzis HaShekel, we access that world. So this is an additional possible quasi-proof to the connection between Shkolim and Shofars. We have a guest, hopefully in the second part of our program, a mystery guest will be joining with us. But let's get on to what's happening in the world. In Eretz Yisrael, as you know, I shouldn't say Eretz Yisrael, Medinat Yisrael. You know, of course, that Netanyahu and Benny Gantz formed a coalition government with Likud and Blue and White. You know that the Blue and White are not tzaddikim, not the Likud is tzaddikim, and not the Blue and White is tzaddikim, and not Netanyahu is a tzaddik, and not Gantz is a tzaddik. So you know that there's a lot of chazarai going on. The Justice Ministry is run by a member of the Blue and White Party. And this Oisvov recently declared his intention that in the year 2020, it's discriminatory that surrogacy should only apply to women who need help having babies, women who are married or whatever it is, or getting old, whatever their criteria are. He says that's discriminatory. What happens if two deviants, two mishkevei zacha, two oisvarfen, want to have a child? So until now, it was illegal surrogacy for that purpose. He is now going to make it legal. So in other words, the government of Netanyahu and Blue and White, understand, they're going to now work on making this deviance legal. It's another elevation of the Sodom and Gomorrah death style. At a time where Israel is struggling with either a second wave or an unfinished first wave of a pandemic. Einayim lahem v'lo yiro. They see not, they don't see. Now, it could be that there's looting going on in New York on protests. It could be that there's still in the middle of a pandemic that's far from over, nationwide and worldwide. It could be that they're busy taking away over, as we heard in the last hour, the Chaim Deutsch program. He interviewed the commissioner of New York, the police commissioner, that they're taking $1.5 billion away from the police department. So what are our erstwhile three yarmulkes in the state legislature? See how they act. Is it a Kiddush Hashem? Don't hold your breath. It's more close to, not to life, but to death. Those are the things that these Menevolim, I'm sorry to say, our representatives with yarmulkes, and some of them with beards, and one of them with a Bek Shampayas, Menuvolim. That's the only word to use for them. For years, these people have been voting for all kinds of schmutz and garbage, proactively contributing to the terrible decline in society. And I'll hammer it away as long as I have koyach. To some people, they want to hear more chidushim. Levin, we heard this from you 12 times, 24 times. You'll hear it from me as long as I have breath, until it penetrates, like Rabbi Akiva with the water, with the rock, with the mushal. The water hit the rock, the water hit the rock, the water hit the rock, drop by drop, until it wore down the rock. And this is what we have to do. People do not begin to understand. There has not been an Orthodox Jewish politician, not Nat Lewin son-in-law, Jules Polonetsky, who was an assemblyman for some years from Brighton Beach, not Heikind, not Felder, not Jaeger, not Deutsch, not the Oiswarfin, Eichenstein, and even worse, Daniel Rosenthal, the Oiswar from Queens. They have all voted for various schmutz bills, some less than others. Noach Dia was by far the best. But they've all betrayed us. And therefore, it's painfully obvious that the debate, which was held on the pages of the Jewish Observer so many years ago between Dr. Bernard Frischman, he should live and be well, and Professor Aaron Tversky, as to whether it behooves the Orthodox Jewish community to have their own as local representatives. And Dr. Frischman said no. And Dr. Tversky said yes. And time has proven absolutely, incontrovertibly, that all we have from them, Chilulei Hashem, on an ongoing basis. Let me give you an example. To be a Chilul Hashem, it doesn't have to be that they mamish voted to teach schmutz in the schools, in the yeshivas. That's not the only Chilul Hashem. Things which contribute to the moral decline of society. Everything is built like building blocks. And our people do this, our representatives, our shlichei tzibur that represent you and me, and they represent more actively those who proactively went out and voted for them, the Eichenstein Frankensteins, and the Oiswarf Rosenthal, the monster. Terrible. So recently there's a resolution the last few weeks, maybe the last few days, a resolution in the New York Assembly and the State Senate, a resolution. Women's History Month. It starts off with the words, this and this woman, I forget her name, it's inconsequential, who was so instrumental in fighting for marriage equality. Marriage equality means mishkav marriage, which brought a model to the world and which became legalized here in New York. Thank you to Andrew Cuomo. And thank you to the fact that Agudas Yisrael and Satmar Lubavitch and everybody else turned the other cheek and did not act as a catalyst. What could we do? Dov Heikind himself, in a rare moment of honesty, Dov Heikind said that it could have been won. This thing could have been done. Dov Heikind, the same one who got up and made this drush he was so proud of. If it wasn't for my Torah, I would be on the other side with you people, meaning with the Mishka V'Zacha, lecking and schmecking fair. If it wasn't for the Torah, the Chazal say that if it wasn't for the Torah, we would learn tznius, modesty, from a cat. So Heikind, very nice guy, done many good things. When it comes to certain things, are bur am oretz, And he made that Chil Hashem. He was so proud of it. He played it over, I think, on his radio program. He put it out there. What do you mean? I stood and I spoke against Mishkav Zacha marriage. Yeah, apologetically. What's the difference between him and, I think, the Catholic Justice Kavanaugh, who said, I can't vote with you because of a technical reason that we shouldn't make the laws about transvestites are considered covered under the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But I congratulate you for your accomplishments and your grit and getting you out of Yemazeh that you're going to win now this acceptance, which is going to be a terrible tragedy. It's disgusting with Kavanaugh. It's a million times more disgusting when you have a Shemer Mitzvahs, a Shemer Torah Mitzvahs like Reb Dov Harkin doing this. I'm sorry. I have respect for him for the good things he's done. He's done many good things. He's a mixed bag. And when you say these, and the truth has to be told, people have to understand. Because these are the people who have been representing us. So I want you to understand something. Rosenthal and the Orthodox Baal Tshuva from Queens, Weprin, and Simcha Felder, I believe. Okay. They all voted for this Women's History Month resolution. I think it's my understanding, I believe, that 29 members of the assembly, I think, did not vote for it. Why wasn't Eichenstein amongst them? This is just a small example. This whole thing advances. It's anerkannt. The whole deviancy agenda. It's geknippt and gebunden. Why is he voting for this? And if anything, the feminism that we see is affecting radically the Frum community, the Torah community. The ideology of feminism, it hasn't seeped in. It has deluged the extreme Haredi community. And that's part of the reason that we have another pandemic that's here 365 solar days a year. I'm talking about the divorce crisis that is initiated close to 90%, according to Batei Din. 90% of the time it's initiated by women. With chalomis, I deserve better, I didn't get good enough, the next one will be better, he's a zhulik, he doesn't earn enough, he's not nice enough to me, he's not matching to me, he's this and that. I'm not saying that the men folk are totally not responsible for this. I'm not saying that many women don't have legitimate kindness, but we have a pandemic and that is being driven by the seepage, rather the deluge, not the trickle down, but the storming down of all the feminist values from the gas and the styles, in every aspect. We do not live in the ghetto. So let me drive this point home to you. It's disgusting how the Rabbanut in Israel is politically correct. And I know horror story after horror story. And there have been significant rabbinic literature taking apart many Piskei Din, where the Rabbanut of Israel has increased mamzerus, bastardy, in Klal Yisrael by requiring gittin and coercing husbands when they are not halachically obligated to give a get. That means that because they feel they're between a rock and a hard place, in order for them to get their appointments on the Rabbanut and on the Batei Din, and there are committees, and part of the committees have pro-feminist men and women on it, and for years already, the Rabbanut has been playing footsie, and therefore they also feel they're under the thumb of the Supreme Court, the Begatz, that's very, very dictatorial there. And for whatever the reasons, they do tremendous, tremendous harm in imposing gittin. There's almost not a case that they do not ultimately side with the woman and oppose gittin and destroy families and take money shaloi kahalacha, and worse than that, cause mamzerus, because if a man is not mechuyev to give a get, and he believes falsely, or he's coerced into it, it's called the get mosa, or he believes falsely. If the rabbis are telling me I have to do it, but he really doesn't want it, he's not entitled. And he hasn't been mollified, pacified into giving the get, really, b'ritzonei hatoiv. So the poskim say from time immemorial, it's not a kosher get. It's not a kosher get, and she remarries the children of Mamzerim. So the Rabbanut in Israel, and they're not the only ones. There are plenty of Batei Din, Orthodox Haredi Batei Din here in America who do similar things. The point is, something very interesting has happened recently. I think the Supreme Court, the Begatz in Israel, I don't exactly remember all the details, but basically there's this terrible organization headed by a person, a rabbi, quote unquote, Seth Farber, and the organization is called ITIN, and basically it advances the feminist agenda primarily to push into Torah orthodoxy, so-called. And recently, Farber and company were successful in front of the Supreme Court that women should have the right to study, to learn, and to get degrees in terms of and their capabilities in halacha and in psak. You understand, this is a giant slice of the salami leading towards women in the Batei Din rabbis. They already have toyanim. They already have, so to speak, rabbinic lawyers, toanot, whatever they call themselves, in these Batei Din. That's already shown a long side, a long time. Now they're going for the next stage. And the Rabbanut from Israel, the Rabbanut is plotting. They're plotting. The Rabbanut, sit down, my friend. The Rabbanut is plotting by this, from this. You understand? They came out with statements. They're very, very afraid that the next step is going to be women rabbis. This is what they're talking about now. So this is a very, very big problem. But rabbis, I want you to understand the poetic justice here. You go and you mandate hundreds and maybe thousands of gittin in which you take a feminist position, and you think that by doing that you will satisfy, you will sate, S-A-T-E, your interlocutors, the liberals, the begats, those politicians. You really think so? You're making a tremendous mistake. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. You can never satisfy them. And all you've done is you sold out Torah values, and now you're having a problem that's coming back. When it hits you in your pocketbook, when it hits you that you're in the unenviable position of having to contend in the Batei Din and Piskei Din and all kinds of things in the corruption of Israel, from women, whether you call them rabbis or halachists or posekas or toanot or whatever you call them, see the Mida connected Mida. And that's why you listen to this program, because I guarantee you, let's take my good friend Rabbi Gordimer's Jewish Torah Coalition Values, whatever they call themselves there, with hundreds and hundreds of rabbis. How did I learn about this thing? Because I saw his roundup from the Rabbis' Round Table, and I saw this. Even Rabbi Gordimer, who's super perceptive, and he does a big Kiddush Hashem, is he going to tell you this kind of insight? Is he going to see the Mida connected Mida? The measure for measure? No. Why will I see it? Is it because is it because that I'm a Talmud Chochem anywhere near the caliber of these rabbis? Absolutely not. I don't put myself out there like that. The reason for this is very simple. Because you could be a layperson, and when you've spent 40 years of your life under the leadership and the guidance for the first tens of years and direction of Gedolei Yisrael of yesteryear, so you have a siyata d'shmaya that extends far beyond your K-E-N, your abilities. Without any further ado, I want to welcome my good friend, Rev. Elliot Resnick, the editor-in-chief of the Jewish Press, who's done a fantastic job in the last few years of taking the paper and I believe really upgrading the paper in many, many areas, in areas of Torah and ideology. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but that improvement, as Elliot is doing the best he can, and we salute him, and it's always a pleasure and a privilege to have him on with us. And we have things to discuss, but first let's discuss what you would like to discuss, and then we'll take it from there. So good evening, Elliot, and what's our first subject this evening?
Good evening, Rabbi Levin. Thank you for having me on the program. I just wanted to discuss perhaps a little bit the riots that are ongoing
Right.
violence against the traditions of this country, against stores, against people. So one thing that was going around Facebook, which I decided to put in the paper this week, someone found an article from a talk that the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave in the 1960s. And the title of the article was Lubavitcher Rebbe on Law and Order. And underneath it was, through violence, one abandons justice. And the Rebbe discussed this. This is the 60s when things started to fall apart in America.
Right.
And he says man is really a rational human being. It's not supposed to, your mind is supposed to rule your heart, not vice versa. So people talk about letting people vent, let them be angry. It's the opposite. Hashem gave us a seichel, God gave us an intellect, and our intellect is supposed to govern our emotions. And letting your emotions run free and to act like an animal on the street where you're destroying stores and destroying people, this is not what a human being is about. And he says also experience has shown that those who have capitulated to lawlessness and anarchy are subsequently faced with a situation where he who has 100 wants 2, and he who wants 200 wants 4. Meaning once you let man's emotions run free, he'll never be satisfied because now he's becoming more like an animal. So you give him a little bit, he'll want even more.
As Shakespeare said, cry havoc and let loose the dogs of war.
Exactly. The continual yielding to the degenerate's proclivities brings the degenerate to the point of no return. And he says you're doing a favor to the person by restraining him, because we know in Judaism we have a tradition that you only sin if a spirit of folly enters your mind. So does a person really want to act out of a spirit of folly? No, after a spirit of folly passes, he realizes, oh, I was acting like an idiot. I was acting without my rational faculties being in order. So if you stop him at that moment when he's not acting rational, in a way you're saving him the way he really truly wants to be. So this was I thought was interesting. From the 1960s, the Rebbe was talking about, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was talking about this.
Before you get to the next step, I want to make a very, very brief comment on this. I just extrapolating off of what you said. In Noach, the parsha says, "Ki hishchis kol basar is darkei," and the militant, the sodomists, the deviants, Mishkevei Zocher, they have a very big problem because it's biblical. So they like to quote the Chazal that says the hashchasa was in terms of bein adam lechaveroi, in terms of stealing and mistreating, etc., etc. But we know from the Midrashim, etc., and that Rashi brings down at the end of Parshas Bereshis, that the world wasn't destroyed. The fate of the deluge of Noach was not sealed until they were koisvin ksubal. They called it gadzutait, l'zachar u'lebehema. There will come a time where they will also do it with animals, as I state. So again, now we have ki hishtas kol basar is two things. It's the hashchasa of bein adam lechaver, the ultimate going down, rioting, looting, ripping off, stealing. Your property is my property, etc., etc. And the twin of that is the hashchasa in immoral behavior. So the truth is, it's elu ve'elu. It's really, really both. And one can suggest that part of the reason at this particular time that we're seeing all of this kind of kihishkis kol basar of a physical type of the bein adam lechaveroi is because for the years and years, and it's ever increasingly cascading towards Gomorrah, constantly legislatively and politically and socially and media-wise of this whole hashchasa agenda in every conceivable way.
Right.
So I want to make one more little point, and then you go on to your next thing. Everybody has a spin on what coronavirus, what was it showing us? And the Gentiles are looking around the world. There is talk that there is a certain religious revival going on internationally by certain segments of the Gentiles. They're realizing, so there were all kinds of reasons that were given. And I would like to share a reason that I have, because remember, Hashem multitasks, so there are really many reasons. I mentioned on my radio program a few weeks ago that there was an in-depth BBC report that goes around the world, and you heard it here on National Public Radio, the terrible problems in India, Pakistan, and third world countries, etc., that the Zionists, the prostitutes, are having because nobody wants to become intimate now because it's sakonis nefashos. And they had an in-depth discussion about it. And I said to myself, in the year 2020, why are we turning on BBC and hearing this discussion? Hashem is sending us soda voce. He's sending us a message that what nobody was able to accomplish and religion wasn't able to accomplish in terms of curtailing illicit intimacies between opposite genders, same genders, etc., what nobody could do, and what's increasingly turning in the other direction of encouraging ultimate licentiousness. Now the corona came along, and everybody all of a sudden, you understand, people are afraid. They're afraid to indulge and engage. So now get this. But at the same time that that's happening, if you'll check from March until now and going forward, and as an example, the Supreme Court decision comes right in the middle of the continuing. In other words, a decision which encourages the same illicit behavior that Corona was in part designed to avoid. So Hashem says, so then we have to come on to the next aspect of Ki Hishres. I'll put out rioters and looters and I'll knock you over the head with the baseball bat. I'll break your stores down, etc., etc. Just the point. You won't hear this anywhere else. And I think it's worth reflecting on. And again, the reason you hear it from me is only because I'm an automaton of the Gedol Yisrael Yesiyah. Let's go. Next point, Elliot.
Not working off the point you just said,
Please.
and long term, really, God and religion and morality undergird society. Without morality, without God long term, there really is no normal society. And because I was mentioning the rabbi, there's another letter he wrote, and also in the 60s, when they took off God from the school. They would no longer let the kids in school start the day of school with a prayer to God. And he warned, he said, he says the only solution is for children to be trained from their earliest youth to be constantly aware of the eye that seeth and the ear that heareth. It must be impressed upon the minds of our growing up generation that the world in which they live is not a jungle where brute force, cunning, and unbridled passion rule supreme, but that it has a master who is not an abstraction, but a supreme being who takes a personal interest in the affairs of each and every individual, and to him everyone is accountable for one's daily conduct. There really is no way of continuing a moral society if you don't have God in the picture. Now, people say, but what do you mean? We have looked, there's been many decades now without God really in society so much, and things seem to be fine. So I'm going to read a little extract from a book. It's called The Faith of Judaism by Isidore Epstein. He lived in England. This book was written in the 1950s. And he says the question of whether God is necessary to society or not, they once asked a person named Lord Bryce this question. And he said, they asked him, what do you think would be the effect of the disappearance of religious education from schools? I can't answer that, he replied, till 3 generations have passed. Then he explains a little bit more this author. Sir Richard Livingstone, in his Education for a World Adrift, in reporting this reply of Lord Bryce, makes the following pertinent comment. We have inherited, he writes, good habits, and habits persist almost indefinitely if there is nothing to destroy them. A plant may continue in apparent health for some time after its roots have been cut, yet its days are numbered, end quote. Then Rabbi Isidore Epstein continues. He was an Orthodox rabbi, not Rabbi Dr. Isidore Epstein. In truth, to use another simile, the religious impulse of hundreds of generations may carry a people along the path of moral life for some time, even as the train glides along after the steam is shut off. But without the driving force of religion, stoppage is inevitable. And with that stoppage, the moral and spiritual values of life must come to an end. So I think this is very important. People don't realize, you could be a good person without God, maybe for a temporary period of time, because we lived in a religious world for almost 2,000 years. So the steam of the engine continues propelling the train forward. Even after the steam runs out, the train will continue going for a few miles. But at a certain point, without any morality, without any God, what propels people to do the right thing? What propels them to not tear down your store if it will achieve a higher end in their mind? For the liberals, their higher end is to introduce what they think, is all the immorality, men marrying men, men becoming women, women becoming men. So whatever will achieve that end, they don't mind. So if it requires New York City to fall down and completely be destroyed, if that's what it takes to create a new world order, so that's what we'll do. Lenin famously said, we need to crack into a few eggs to make scrambled eggs. So if that's what the new world order requires, you have to kill a few million peasants in Ukraine to get the new socialist utopia. That's what we'll do. And I think this is important and something we should get involved in a little bit more. I just interviewed for the Jewish press a lady named Inez Stepman. She very involved in education policy. And she says we've let the leftists run the school system for 50 years, the public school system, the university school system. She said, what did you think is going to happen? If the left continues running the culture, this is what kind of country you'll get. And we, I think, have to be more involved. We're carrying the Jewish press by Victor Miller once a month. And he was very much for getting involved in some of these culture war fights. If you want to have a future America that's a normal, safe, moral country, we need to be a little bit more involved in trying to support those people who are trying to fight back. And if no one's fighting back, then we have to be the ones stepping up to the plate. If there are no men, strive to be a man.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate the source that you brought, and I want to comment on that. But first, I want to say this is very, very important. We live in politically correct times, and we just heard in the last hour, for those who were listening, Chaim Deutsch, the councilman, was one of the few people, I guess, who voted in the city council against the $88, if I'm correct, $1 billion city budget, because his reason for voting against it was because they defunded the police by between $1 and $1.5 billion. Of course, I would have been happy if Chaim said I can't vote for the budget because there's probably hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that are promoting all kinds of evil and schmutz, some of which unfortunately Chaim himself has voted for in the past, like curricula in the schools that reinforce things that are anathema to the values for which we lived and died since we became a nation. But I just want to say this because it's very important. We do not loathe or hate people who are challenged, whatever their challenges might be in terms of intimacy, whether their challenges are of a heterosexual nature, adultery, underage, whatever it is, whether it's same gender, all kinds of things that are biblically prohibited. We are faithful to our religion, and as such, we have to talk out our opposition. I would want to point out that that for many years, a leading advocate of the whole militant homosexual agenda, and having another senior moment, and his name escapes me, a Catholic. He freely admitted to me on the very day that they instituted same-gender marriage in New York, and a group of us, Jews and non-Jews, were marching together in protest, and he came down, and he told me that I never said anything to encourage hate or violence to homosexuals. His whole claim was that other people could extrapolate it. That hasn't changed. And now we're in a situation, Chaim Deutsch said that when he voted no on the budget, immediately they started to boo him, and he was condemned as being a racist because he doesn't go along with all the craziness. And that's the situation to which we are being put. So there will be some who will try to take this broadcast and will try to take what we're saying here and try to construe us as haters or racists or bigots. We do discriminate. We discriminate in terms of Torah biblical values, which are a billionfold more legitimate and valid than whatever happens to come along today. Rebbe, let's continue.
No, I just, based on the point you were just making about us being Torah Jews, we have to represent God on earth, and God has certain values. God thinks certain things are right, certain things are wrong, and it's our job to say what's right and wrong. And I just want to read another excerpt from Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, the great 19th century German rabbi, Because our people, what I'm about to read, he's describing an attitude today, which many people have, that religion is supposed to be nice, what makes people feel good. If it doesn't make you feel good, don't say it.
Right.
But it's not the case. Torah has certain right and wrong. So he says, he's making fun of these people, being sarcastic. The teacher of the community must be impartial. He's giving like a quote, what people say, which means that the truth is to be no concern of his. He must never object to anything. He must have his aphorisms of approval prepared for everything. For the rightists and the leftists, for the old and the new, for the true and the false. He must be neutral on all questions. He is expected to have picked out for himself only the kernel from the rich treasure of the divine truth, the kernel of truth which everyone will accept. Precisely because it bothers no one, he must pass the truth through the sieve of peace. And he's making fun. It's obviously not the way we're supposed to be. What, you only say the truth where it makes people feel good? And if it doesn't make people feel good, therefore you don't say the truth? It's not so. And he writes somewhere else also. We think, I think for a period of time we lived like in a more moral society. So Torah values and most of the world society coalesced, so it made us feel good. We didn't have to fight so much. But when the Torah was given, the Torah was not given to a world where the world agreed with biblical values. Abraham was on one side of the world. The rest of the world was against him. He was constantly fighting. He didn't fit in. He didn't fit in with the intellectual elite of the time. He was constantly against the intellectual elite of the time. We were lucky that for a while in the West, thank God, most of our values lined up with the West's values, so you didn't have to fight so much, perhaps, on certain issues. But most of our history, when the Torah was given, it was given to a world that was constantly serving idols, constantly immoral. All these things you're talking about, homosexuality. I was once speaking to an uncle of mine who's extremely educated. He said in the ancient Near East, the ancient land of Israel, where we came to, homosexuality was rampant. It was considered a mainstream value. It wasn't something that we know. The Torah just reflected mainstream values at the time. No, when the Torah was given, it did not reflect mainstream values. It was against the mainstream values. So I think more than ever, the Torah, and we really are the counter-revolutionaries, the counter-culture people. The young people think, I want to be cool. I'm going to go against society. If you want to go against society, you have to be an Orthodox Jew. Then you're going against society. Correct. If you go on drugs and you smoke and you have quote-unquote fun, that's not countercultural. You're doing exactly what everyone else is doing. To be countercultural is to stand up for something that's against what society is doing, not to go with the flow, to stand up for truth, for things that are divine, for things that are everlasting. And just one more thing, I'll just read very quickly, because I know Victor Miller was basically your teacher, one of your teachers. Sure. So we carry him in the Jewish press once a month. So he, some of his questions and answers that he delivered at the end of his classes. Somebody asked him about July 4th. Should we hang out flags on July 4th? Absolutely. He said, I do hang out a flag in my synagogue on July 4th. He said, America is a great gift. And I say that every Jew today should hang out a flag on the 4th of July, even if it's just lahaches, just to show the liberals, to show the Rishayim, the wicked people, that we do appreciate America. You have to know that the liberals and the leftists are ruining America. They do things only because of wickedness, and therefore we should do the opposite. They want to destroy the moral fabric of America, and the least we can do is to show that we appreciate the great gift of America. So Rabbi Miller was a fighter. We need more fighters like this.
You walked into my house, you'll see hanging right outside. 365 days a year, I have a flag hanging outside my house.
No, it's tremendous, but I think we need more fighters. Right now, the whole country's being torn apart. They're ripping down statues. They're ripping down George Washington. They're ripping down Abraham Lincoln. If I could say one quick thing on that also. In our tradition, we honor people for... Why do you have to honor your parents? The most mainstream explanation for why you have to honor your parents, which I think most halachic Jewish legal experts say, is not because they were great people necessarily. You honor your parents because they gave you life.
Correct.
We honor George Washington and Christopher Columbus and Abraham Lincoln because they gave us this country. Without Christopher Columbus, we would not have discovered this country. Correct. So therefore, we honor him. Doesn't mean he might not have made mistakes in other areas of life. We thank him for what he did. He founded this country. We say thank you. George Washington founded this country. We say thank you. Same reason you honor your parents, because they gave you life. They might have been bad people in other areas. It doesn't matter. You say thank you. You give thanks where thanks is due. Famously, according to the Medrash Jewish tradition, Moses couldn't even hit the Nile River. When God tells him to hit the Nile River to start the plague of blood, he can't hit the Nile River. Why? Because he was hid by the Nile River. Right. We have to give gratitude. The whole country's falling apart, and we on the right, the religious right, the non-religious right, anybody, we're sitting at homes cowering. And it's time we have to fight back, or else we're not going to have a country. We're going to live in a jungle again. That's what we're going to live in, a jungle, a secular jungle.
100%. And I want to get to some important information. As I mentioned, by far, unfortunately, the worst legislator that we have wearing a yarmulke is Daniel Rosenthal of Queens. Now, they just had a bill in the assembly that he voted for, and the bill is that until now, loitering, hanging around for the purpose of soliciting znus, prostitution, is on the books as a criminal act and can be prosecuted. But the black, get this, the black and transgendered people had a massive rally in Brooklyn with thousands of people in late in June. As of June 11th, Daniel Rosenthal was not a sponsor of the bill that would decriminalize loitering for the purposes of prostitution. Okay, which is really, it's mostly because there's a tremendous amount of these transgendered people who are involved in prostitution. Those who know, and they earn their livelihood that way, deathlyhood, unfortunately. And it was only after that rally that suddenly Rosenthal became a co-sponsor. Now, somebody circulated an email to various community leaders, activists, and people of interest that they should know what Mr. Rosenthal has been doing, that it runs counter to everything that we stand for. I can promise you this is probably the 10th or 20th piece of legislation that is inimical, is antithetical to Torah values, and which is supportive of deviance and baby killing, etc., which Mr. Rosenthal has embraced. This kimat, not a liberal shibboleth of this type that he does not support. Now, somebody else, I understand, called up the office and spoke with the chief of staff or a high-up official from Rosenthal. And in the exchange there, Rosenthal's people threatened that they're going to try to find out who sent this email and have the police get involved, because this is harassment. Now, what this is Masira. This is Masira. First of all, you little twit Rosenthal, you little baby. I would say some other words in Yiddish that they use, but it's not appropriate for a person my age to use those words. If it's too hot for you in the kitchen and you feel uncomfortable when you support such disgusting things, then instead of trying to thuggerize and threaten people who publicize what you're doing, cease and desist. But the bigger question is now going to be, Rabbi Schoenfeld of Queens, Rabbi Welcher, who's who's Daniel Rosenthal's rabbi, Rabbi Peretz Steinberg, who I know for close to 55 years, the dean of the rabbinate and the political rabbinate there in Queens. What are these rabbanim going to do? Ad Mosai, in the middle of a pandemic, how much more immorality do we have to countenance? Now, I want to say, I have a suggestion that would mitigate some of the charoin af of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't be happy about this stuff. Elikei shel elu soinei zimo. So here's the deal. If the 3 or 4 yarmulkes would start to do a Shelley Silver had the grace not to go around with a yarmulke. That Eichenstein take off the bekesher, clip the payas, shave the beard, take off the yarmulkes. On my achrayas, I promise they will take me out of Gehenna to say edus that I was the one who told them, and they listened to me, let them take off the yarmulkes. It's that kind of a thing. If a person is going to go to do a Devar Aveira, both the Bavli and Yerushalmi say it, and I think it's codified in the Rambam, I believe. Yelech l'makom acher she'ein ish makirenu. Go to a place where you're not recognized. Yilbash chayrim. Get in disguise. Do not be recognized as a Jew and do what you're doing. At least take off the accoutrements of Jewish orthodoxy. Do not continue, all of you, weapon voted for this garbage. Did Weprin vote for this garbage? I'm not sure. But Weprin voted for the prostitution thing. They all voted for it,
Wasn't he for the?
including Felder.
Wasn't he for two men marrying each other, David?
Yes, he got up and he spoke about it. Even though I'm an Orthodox Jew,
Right.
he gave a whole direction. Rabbi Say, this is so important to understand. Machrivayach umeharsayach mimech. It's coming from us. Our destruction is not coming from outside forces. It's coming from us. As I've said in the past programs, as recently as last week, it is not coincidental that abortion passed New York State in the early 70s by 1 or 2 votes, and those votes specifically came from the Borough Park and Williamsburg assemblyman. There was a Silverman and somebody with an F, a Feldman or whatever his name was in Williamsburg, and they both got the go-aheads basically that the Orthodox community early on showed they don't give a darn about abortion. Sort of like Ahmadinejad. We don't have Mishkaveh Zachar in Iran. Remember when he said that in the United Nations or at Columbia, rather, and they laughed at him? In other words, we don't have abortions. First of all, the Orthodox community has abortions. And second of all, non-Orthodox Jews certainly commit abortions. And third of all, it's also for B'nai Neach. It's feticide is a capital offense. So when they did this in New York, that triggered the Supreme Court's Roe versus Wade decision. Similarly, a few turncoats in the Republican Senate under Dean Skelos, who was let out of prison because of the corona thing, these turncoat Republicans who Skelos allowed to quote-unquote vote their conscience, they're responsible for having marriage pass in New York State. And once it passed in New York State, it became Supreme Court, the law of the land, and then it went on to corrupt other countries. If you trace it back, it's a little handful of Orthodox Jews spiritually through their malfeasance and their negligence and their ignorance in turning the other cheek to this stuff and letting these people go off to their legislators, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or it's in New York, upstate in Albany, and do what they want. And that's why we have the problems that we have. Rabbi Sai, I want you to understand how this thing works. The more that people go asunder, the more blinded they become. And I've spoken about this in the past. I'll say it again. The idiom is, in tazveni yom, yamayim azveka. If you leave me for 1 day, God says, I leave you for 2. It takes 2 days for you to get back. When there's post-Stonewall, 50 years of malfeasance, of turning the other cheek, of ignoring but all the deviancy agenda and legislation, etc. So now you could have Satmar rabbis of the Kal Yitavlei Bezdin signing a kol koirei, a decree, the day before the election, 2 weeks ago on Monday, stating that it's a kiyum of Torah and mitzvahs. You have to vote for Joseph Lenthal, who's supporting the loitering bill, the prostitution bill, who's supporting bills that literally pushed the Mishkav Zachar agenda into the private schools, and so many other garbage things that he's done, the Codes Committee. And the rabbis go and they use Torah language, and they say whoever's fighting against Lenthal, they say is Osid Liten Es Hadin. He's going to have to give them cheshbon. A topsy-turvy Alice in Wonderland world, which we might not have had since the time of Noah. It's unbelievable. Why does this happen? The more we blind 1 day, we get more blind. We blind 2 days, we get blinded for 50 years. This is the garbage you have. Now, people sit comfortably listening to this radio program, they're entertained, and they'll say, what does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? I'm sitting in my home, I don't support abortion, I don't support this immoral agenda. The answer is very simple. I'll say it again and again. You know that we have a plague. We have a plague of divorce. We have the plague of immodesty amongst our Haredi girls and women. They don't know what modesty is anymore. Many, many people. We have a plague of pedophilia and Mishkav Zachar of all kinds going on. And there are at least 10 different pseudo-Orthodox organizations that are internationally that are promoting the deviant lifestyle in every conceivable way. All of this, we are going to have to give an account of. What do you mean? Oh, I'm busy. I'm raising my family. I have my shiurim, daf yomi. because the Chazal tell us, "Midolei michu shtika koida." You do not protest. You're part of the problem. You vote for these lowlifes. What should we do? So I had this conversation today when I complained to somebody, an official of Hamodia, on the disgusting thing. We're down to 1 minute, so we're going to have to really. So he told me, "What happens? You have two people lent all the other oisvar." So I said, if God has Hitler running against Torquemada, it's arrogance to say, I have to decide what God wants, the lesser of two evils, and I have to compromise with evil. You say, Hashem, I don't deserve anymore. I didn't deserve to have a good choice. I'm going to do a write-in. I'll write in the name Rabbi Avigdor Miller. I'll write in the name Mr. Morality. Imagine if 50,000 Jews in the next election in November would write in the words Mr. Morality. The secular media would have to take notice. The Gentiles, the religious Gentiles would be inspired. And we lose nothing. It costs us nothing. We go into the voting booth. No, instead, we have to be the God's cup mention to figure out who to vote for, who to say, and then we make all the cheshbonis. This is Yehuda Levin. Until we meet again, a good Shabbos, a good Talmud, and thank you, Elliot Resnick. You're always welcome here on the program. Thank you very, very much. Okay, my friend. Now,
how do you do it?